Hi, my name is Abigail Salvucci. I'm a senior sociology major here at Framingham State University, and this presentation is looking at my past semester work of my honors thesis, and the title of this project is called The Overlooked Victims of Insecurity, a look into a four-year public university's handling of food and housing insecurity. So starting up, my research process for this project was really looking into how that public four-year university compares to the previous literature in housing and food insecurity. Some of my questions asked when doing my research is, how is a student's experience of housing and food insecurity affected by their institution safeguards? And how does the staff of the university feel about the university's role in aiding students who are experiencing insecurity? My research was completed using one-on-one in-depth interviews via video online calls. So starting off, my literature review found four themes in previous academic literature. That's the new economics of attending college, recommended safeguards and resources, students' knowledge and use of resources, and Band-Aid not a fix. So the new economics of attending college really found that higher proportions of students face financial burdens than in the past. College is more expensive than before. More students from low-income families are attending than before, lowering the federal aid financial power. And it's harder to pay for college by working, and state funding for public colleges have lessened. By 2016, 39% of students were from households where incomes were at or below 130% of the federal poverty line, an increase from 1996, where it was only 28% of students. That 11% increase, we can see a trend that more students are coming from more poverty homes. The price of a four-year degree has also doubled from 1989 to 2016, even after inflation. And from the school year of 2005-2006 to the school year of 2015-2016, the prices of public institutions rose 34%, and the price of nonprofit institutions rose 26%. So some of the recommended safeguards and resources found in the previous literature showed that there was four main kind of plans across literature. A single point of contact. So a single point of contact would be the go-to person on campus, usually referred to as SPOC, S-P-O-C. This is the person that would be in charge of the housing and food insecurity plan for the students. Next would be an on-campus food pantry. The literature recommends all sorts of amenities included on it, but just having that access to food is a great first step. Part of this on-campus food pantry should also be giving information about outside food pantries, off-campus food pantries, and what information those students need to use those off-campus food pantries, whether it's they need an ID, they need a write-off from their caseworker, whatever that may be, just give them the information. And third is a scholarship housing program. So this is something that they do in the South where, they have students apply with GPAs, their credits, what year they are, and try to get free housing. And so it's mostly used in community colleges right now. It's called the Southern Scholarship Program. And they have found success by giving students housing with the academic goal. And it's really helped their students stay in classes. And then the fourth option would be involving professors. Professors are usually frontline workers and see when students are feeling hungry in class or sleepy in class. And they can be the ones that can give that frontline support for students who are experiencing those forms of insecurities. And when you're seeing a professor, twice a week, 3 times a week, they're building that bond that can make the student feel more comfortable to come to them for resources. So our next theme amongst our literature review was the student's knowledge and use of resources. In the research, there was a lot of themes of altruism. The student not wanting to use it because they don't want to take it from someone else. At Kansas State University, a study of 1,906 undergraduates and graduates asked if you would use an on-campus food pantry. 20.3% respondents of the study answered unlikely or very unlikely. When asked to explain why, 30.9% answered in a theme of altruism, saying that they don't want to take the resources from someone else, that someone needs it more than them. And then 4.7% respondents answered stigma, one saying, I don't like people knowing that I'm struggling. At this same university, though, 44% of students reported being a form of food insecure, and a majority of the respondents knew at least one other person who is food insecure. And so, when you have 44% of the students saying that they are and that they know one other person, but only 20.3 of the respondents are saying that they don't want to use the on-campus food pantry because they don't want to take it from someone else, and 4.7 of the respondents are saying that they wouldn't use it because of stigma. That shows that there's something going on there and that there's a culture there that needs to be adjusted to make sure that the students are being supported and that it's not just implementing resources, it's a bigger picture. Which leads us into our last theme, Band-Aid, not a fix. Putting in resources is really only addressing the surface wound of housing and food insecure. Making sure someone has food, making sure someone has housing while they're at school doesn't acknowledge that they might not have housing and food when they leave campus or when they're on breaks, or that their family, people that they care about, or their guardians might not have access to those resources as well. One story shared in the literature was that a student had to go part-time because her housing program wouldn't let her go as a full-time student. She lived in off-campus affordable housing with her mom, and she had to step down to part-time because her housing said that it was just not allowed. But when her mom got sick and she had to work, and Anne had to step up for her work, the housing authority told her she couldn't work too much. And so that's kind of the thing that we're seeing in literature, is that students are being stuck in this in-between where they're supposed to work, they're supposed to carry themselves, and supposed to be independent, but there's a lot of rules around them that don't allow them to make those moves. And when the resources are limited on campus, the student can't ask for help and the student can't use those resources. And tying it back in with Band-Aid, not a fix, implementing resources doesn't change the culture around stigma. It doesn't change outside offices. It just puts a Band-Aid on a bigger issue that needs to be addressed by our culture and our community. And so my methods within my own personal research were interviews with students and interviews with professional staff members on the university's campus. So my interviews with students, I interviewed 3 students at the university, and they were interviewed individually on video calls. Ages ranged from 20 to 30 years old, and their years of graduations included the class of 2021 and the class of 2022. Students were selected to participate within the study via volunteer-based sampling. So there's a form of bias, as they knew what they were getting themselves into. They knew that they were going to be discussing their experiences of food and housing insecurity. Some of the areas that the students were asked about was their college degree seeking experience. What made them choose this university? What made them choose their degree? And really what is their style of learning. A second is how they work and how they pay for college. So are they using loans? Are their parents helping them? Is there, another plan for them? Are they paid off? Third is food and housing experience. So what's their experience like on campus currently, using the food and housing programs? So their dining plans, their dorms, what are those experiences? And fourth, is change needed on campus? What are the thoughts from the students? What do the students think they need to change on campus? Next were my interviews with the professional staff members. 2 professional staff members at this university were interviewed individually via online video calls. Their positions include the Vice President of Enrollment and Student Development and the Coordinator for Student Support through the Dean of Students Office. Staff members were selected to participate using purposeful sampling. I wanted to interview professional staff members who were involved in this work and knew what was going on already, so that way there'd be a more enriched and more in-depth interview and conversation between us. Some areas of their questions included their role and experience on campus, what programs and safety nets are already in place at the university, and is change needed from the professional staff side. So what I really found in my research with them was 5 concepts. There's students' frustrations with housing and food on campus, resources take innovation, miscommunication between professional staff and students, there's a culture of altruism, and investment of the staff. So starting off, students' frustrations with housing and food on campus. Some of the concerns of the students around housing were that there was extra cost for single living in dorms. Even for medical reasons, one student shared that there was a $500 extra fee on students, and that really drives students away from the students, like from using singles, even if there's the students who need them. And the medical singles require documentation, and sometimes students don't have documentation of their medical history, and that's really creating a barrier of accessibility for students who might just want to live by themselves or more successfully academically be in a single than living with someone that they don't know and they don't trust. Another concern of housing from the students was not having cost accessible housing in each dorm building. One student who is a junior, the class of 2022, shared that she had to live in the predominantly freshman building this year because she could not afford to live in the upperclassmen housing. But as a cost of having to save money, she doesn't get to live with her community. She has to live with people younger than her that she doesn't get along with, she doesn't know, and she feels kind of separated from her Groupon community and feels very isolated during this time. Another, area of concern was food. One student shares that they have a hard time accessing 3 meals a day, and that the timing of class and work really interrupts when they're able to go eat. Some days only getting up to eat 1 meal or 2 meals a day, and on average only being able to eat 3 meals 2 days a week. It's not healthy, it's not nutritious. That's really taking a toll on the student's health. And another concern was that the dietary restrictions add a barrier to accessing those healthy meals. So even when you're able to get to the dining hall and able to have a meal, it's not guaranteed that you are going to be able to have a nutritious, well-rounded meal. One student shared that, she is vegetarian and that when they go there, they see everything smothered in butter or it's using coconut, so it's a fatty dietary additive that, isn't healthy. And even when those options aren't available, they're not always guaranteed another option. And so the one student shared that they always run the risk of going home hungry even after going to the dining hall. And so we see that the food and housing options on campus are there, they're available, but they're not serving the student to the best ability. And so there's some concerns with the options that there are now. Our next theme is the resources take innovation. And so comparing this university to the previous literature, there are a large number of resources available on campus that have been mentioned in previous literature. The campus uses an on-campus food pantry with resources to outside food pantries. There is a single point of contact who is the coordinator of student support, and there is emergency funding from multiple offices, including the Vice President's Office, Financial Aid, and the Alumni Association. And one additive resource is that they have an emergency meal bank, meaning that, they can give a student a 25 block or a 50 block meal set for this semester, and the student can go and use it when they need it. So that way they know there's food available for that student, and they don't have to worry about making their own food or finding time to make food. They just have the food ready to go for them, that they can go to the dining hall and not have to worry about paying for that extra fee. One thing we found though is that outside experiences can create barriers. So one of the concerns is around FAFSA. FAFSA is a very tricky program to use and can create a lot of issues when working with the student's experience and security. If a student didn't fill out FAFSA, the university doesn't know how much aid to give the student. And if the student does go to the single point of contact, the single point of contact has to work with the student to get through FAFSA. Some of the issues around FAFSA may be that if they're estranged from their family or they are not talking with their parents, a lot of FAFSA is about parental documents and what your parents made. And if you're not in contact with your family, FAFSA is meaningless to you. You can't use it. And that's some of the issues that even when you do get FAFSA figured out and you work with a single point of contact, it can take weeks to process, and it really slows down supporting the students. Another barrier was distance learning with this pandemic that's going on right now. A lot of students are living far away from campus, and their single point of contact on campus is having to try to find new ways to support those students because they're not able to use the on-campus food pantry and they have to find new ways to find support in their area. And so the single point of contact, first tried to use gift cards and sending gift cards out to those students to, restaurants or supermarkets in their area. But administration at the university doesn't allow the use of gift cards because they're a 1099 and it's a lot of paperwork and it's something that they can't afford to do legally right now. And so that adds another barrier that the single point of contact has to work with the supports in the students' areas to try and figure out how they can support them, even if the student lives 2 hours, 3 hours away from campus. It just really adds another level of intensity that they have to find new ways to make around. And some of the necessary innovations that the single point of contact has already found is that the single point of contact will play a role as a caseworker with local programs. So if the student needs to go into a non-traditional housing program, if the student can't be brought into campus or living on campus because of whatever the reasons, if they have a non-traditional family, if they're living with their siblings, the SPOC will play a role as a caseworker and help them find housing in, the local support system. This also includes local food pantries, rehabilitation programs. The SPOC really takes a caring role in the student support. Another innovation that the university had to overcome was that large costs are needed to make a system change. On average, large grants are needed to make a systemic change for supporting students with insecurity. We see this with the vice president. They explained a story about how they went to this presentation at NASPA and they were saying all these great things, and the presentation was telling them, oh, just do this, just do this. And then the presentator shared that they had a $500,000 grant. And the vice president was like, okay, that's meaningless to me now because not everyone has access to $500,000 to just throw into revamping their system. And so the university had to use a lot of innovation on finding how to make their own support system without that large money donated. Another theme is the miscommunication between professional staff and students. One of the concerns from students comes with on-campus offices. Some students have dealt with lost paperwork that's almost nulled their acceptance to the university. Some dealt with unexpected charges and fees in financial aid office that thankfully were worked through, but the student wasn't ready for that. And one student shared that if they didn't have the $100 now, they're not going to have the extra $100 after the fee. And so thankfully the office worked with them, but it's an extra stress added to the student's life that they're not prepared for. Students are unaware of where to go. Lack of knowledge on which offices are where, who to talk to, and why to talk to them. Where is the money being used? A lot of the students interviewed feel like they don't know where it's going and who to talk to. And, where is the single point of contact's office? How do you get in touch with the single point of contact's office? Students just didn't know the information. However, the staff doesn't know if students need help if they don't reach out. The vice president shared that they have an emergency funding pot of over $40,000 this year, but it's not being touched. And this vice president has this money and is willing to use it, but if the students don't reach out, the vice president doesn't know that they need funding. And similar with the alumni office, the Alumni Association has a pot ready to go of emergency funding for students, but students haven't been coming to use it haven't come to use it in the past year. And the vice president actually had to explain to the alumni office that they're experiencing the same thing. Across the board, students aren't coming in for support right now. And one of the issues that the single point of contact is dealing with is a loss of communication with previous students. Students used to be coming in and then the communication stopped and they can't get in contact with them and they can't keep supporting them. So there really seems to be this miscommunication on both sides of what to do, where to go, and who do I help. And there's also a culture of altruism. Students don't want to take resources from others. They explain that they fear using the on-campus food pantry because the items that they take from there would just sit and not be used and not be utilized, and they don't want to take that from someone else. But when the students do come for help, the dean of students will hear from students who come in and are like, oh, I need $200 for a textbook, or can you help me cover this fee? And then when they're helping those students, they'll realize that it actually led to larger concerns. The student might have a hold of $2,000 on their account. And, you know, students are like, well, oh, I didn't know you could help with that. I didn't want to take that from someone else. These are the concerns that the dean of students is dealing with on their side right now because they want to help. You just have to tell them that you need help. And students are not always willing to share that need for help. And then finally, it's the investment of the staff. We found that the staff is involved in the insecurity work is really invested in their work. The vice president defined herself as a frontline supporter. She's someone who grew up poor and remembers being poor, and that she shared that it's essential that all universities have someone like that, that there's someone who cares about the investment of the students and cares about taking care of those students and the realities of what it means to be poor. Not everyone can afford a backpack. Not everyone can afford books. Not everyone can afford laptops. But sometimes people don't think of that. The vice president shared one quote from one of their coworkers saying, well, if you're in college, how can you be homeless? We take college as a privilege to the point that, if you're in college, you can't be poor, which is just not true. It's not reality. And so you need to have staff who's invested in the program to defend the realities of the cost of the students. The vice president shared that there's this thing called the Educational Necessities Program on campus, and usually they pay for books. But the vice president had to argue that backpacks should be included with the educational necessities. How can you expect students to buy all these books and have nothing to carry them across campus? And so, in this research, we found that, the staff is really invested in the work of supporting students here. And so some of the conclusions and implications come from that the implementations of resources is not enough. When there's a big culture of altruism and not wanting to take from others, the resources aren't going to be able to break that down by themselves. It's not enough to say, okay, well, you have your on-campus food pantry, you have these emergency funding pots, if no one's going to be able to use them and no one wants to use them because they don't want to take from other people. And so, you have the smaller pieces going on this campus. You have the resources, you have the emergency funding, you have your single point of contact, but now it's time to build a bigger picture, and part of that bigger picture is breaking down that culture of altruism. And so some of the limitations in this research included that it was a small population study. There was only 5 people interviewed, and that doesn't give a full in-depth experience of what this university is going through, and it was only an exploratory study. So it was really looking into the concerns of the campus right now, what the campus looks like, not where the roots of the experience are right now. It was just surface level experience. And so for future research, the housing and food insecurity amongst college students is still a relatively new topic study. It needs to be further studied at a full picture experience. But some of this research should include how to support students and how to redo their programs at universities with less monetary support. Not every university has the funds to do a complete revamp at $500,000. And also, future research should include professional staff members in the discussion. Professional staff members play a big role in what the university's game plan is. And previous literature really focused on what resources are available and what the students think. And so I think bringing in staff members to the discussion will really paint that full picture experience that this research really needs. And so thank you so much for coming to my presentation. I really appreciate you stopping by and listening, and I hope you have a great day.